ideas come from the earth. They come from every human experience that you either witness or have heard about, translated into your brain in your own sense of dialogue, in your own language form. Ideas are born from what is smelled, heard, seen, experienced, felt, emotionalized. Ideas are probably in the air, like little tiny items of ozone. That's the easiest thing on earth, is to come up with an idea. Then the second thing is, the hardest thing on earth is to put it down. Who was it that said, writing is the easiest thing on earth? He said, I simply walk into my study, I sit down, I put the paper in the typewriter, and I fix the margins, and then I turn the paper up, and I bleed.
Hey everybody, this is Hiram Sims coming to you live from the Sims Library of Poetry. Today we are profiling Rod Serling, who was an American screenwriter, a television producer, and a playwright, most known for his work on the famous American TV show The Twilight Zone. Here are his top rules for writers.
Of course, I think isn't there a risk you run if you preoccupy yourself with audience reaction at the expense of either your own integrity or your own artistic judgment? I'm convinced that 90% of the writers who walk around laying claim to the honored sobriquet of writer are thinking in a sizable portion of their mind, will they love it in Des Moines? Will they understand it in New Orleans? And consequently will deliberately prostitute and write downward to what they believe is the lowest common denominator. And when you start to preoccupy yourself, I think you're in trouble. This is not to say that I wouldn't share the Fellini feeling, if indeed that's the way he thinks, that I will write only for dirty old Rod, and that which pleases me must please you, and if it doesn't, to hell with you. But the reverse, I think, the concern should also be extant, that I must realize that because I am writing in an art form, the whole function of the art form is to be translated to other people. There's an emotional experience to be shared. Consequently, it isn't just me and my tower. It's how people will react to what I write. But very often, one of the major problems with strong writers who deal in dialogue above plot, which happens to be, I think, more my forte than plot, dialogue. If you look at some of the pages of the stuff I've written, and even some of the good things, shut your eyes, you won't know who's talking, because they all talk alike. And who do they talk like? Me. Now that's wrong, and it's something I've got to lick over the years, but it's the most common literary problem, I think, of strong dialogists. All writers are born and never made. The talent to recreate in language the experience of life has to be God-given. On the other hand, we can sharpen the wit of a writer. We can point out style to him. We can use the criteria that is age-old, 3,000 years of theater, that he can utilize to make a judgment on the value of his own work. We can show him what can move people, what can move human beings. He can go to see a play of Diary of Anne Frank, and that's lesson one in the long facet of the human emotion. This kind of thing, with this kind of heart and simplicity, will move people. And that's a great educative experience for him. This is not to say he must go out and write a story about a doomed child in an attic, but the level of emotion that he can learn from that film is quite an experience for him. But when you pose the age-old question, can I learn to write? Can I be taught to be creative? Can I be taught further to analyze and dissect and observe? Because observation is key. This is paramount in the right of the creator, to observe life. No, but you can say, those are where your eyes are. And you can say, use those eyes in that ghetto over there. Or you can say, take that typewriter and take it up to your room and spew it out, that gut-level feeling that you have. You can show them how that's done. You can teach them a sense of timing, a sense of discipline, which is paramount to the writer. You must be the most self-disciplined beast walking the earth. I don't think there's anything on earth as difficult as writing. I take off and write out of a sense of desperate compulsion. I always write as if I just gotten my x-ray from the doctor on Monday, and he'd best check with the insurance man and see whether or not the house is free and clear. I always write with a sense of desperate urgency. Now, I don't think this is necessarily a preoccupation with my own demise, Doris. I think I'm good for another 18 months at least. But I always write as if, gee, get it down. Now, other writers, and many fine writers, and many writers finer than I might add, are very craftsmanlike, meticulous, delvers into structures, scenes, costumes, biographies of their people. They have everything seen down in note form before they begin. They also have a very good idea of the sense of, if it's a play, they're acts, if it's a novel, they're chapters. I don't at all. I just have a rough sense.
Would you write more than one work at a time? I mean, do you feel you have to have that pressure behind you?
I write pretty well that way, Dick, because I'm sort of a product of the times, which is the mass media. And many television writers and screenwriters will dabble on a couple of levels at the same time. Not with the knowledge of their employers, but, for their own edification. And they do this, I think, out of compulsion in part, out of the fact that they may have become hung up in one of their projects, and very often just because that's the way they work best. I wouldn't advise it necessarily, as a run-of-the-mill approach to writing. But if you can handle 2 or 3 projects at a time, I don't think that hurts. If you can totally divorce yourself from the other. I wish more good writers would put themselves and their own works to a test. I wish they would write. I too often hear from students, for example, or from anyone. I get this in the mail via correspondence in sizable, voluminous amounts. I'm not a writer, but I've got this idea, and if you could just write it. Well, that's not the key question. The key question is, can you sit down and write it? Would you try? And then, of course, they're hung up by style and technique. They're hung up by how do I split a page for a television script or something like that, which is hardly of the essence. It's story that counts. It's heart, it's feeling, it's reality, it's legitimacy, it's authenticity, it's honesty. It's the capacity for the printed word or the spoken word to move you. These are the key things, not if you know how to split a script or if you know how a screenplay, or do you know what a camera direction is, this sort of thing. You can learn that in a trade school, I'm sure, and probably in 7 days. The instinct of creativity must be followed by the act, the physical act of putting it down for a sense of permanence. Once you get that prod, that emotional jar, that I have witnessed something, or I have felt something, or I have seen something, or through observation, I have been moved by an event, I think the answer is get it down quickly, write it down. Now, very often, by virtue of the very enormity of the emotion, you will write it down in perhaps a distorted fashion, or an improper fashion, or an incorrect fashion, or your values may be a little juxtaposed. You may be too moved by the emotion. You haven't stepped far enough away back to get a perspective of the event. But I think as a basic overall thing, the clue to the writer, to the creator, is don't let it die a boiling in the head. Mm-hmm. Don't let it exist as just a simple memory that will move you or will conjure up a beautiful tune later on. I think self-knowledge is one of the beautiful and marvelous and creative aids that we have, know thyself, because you can look at yourself in the mirror and get a whole list of all of the human attributes and human frailties that are extant. Whatever is wrong with you is conceivably wrong with most of your peers. Whatever is decent and good and fine and caring that is a part of your nature is also the meritorious aspects of, again, your peers. But if you know yourself, and this is one of the marvelous key self-tests that you can make all the time in your writing, just a piece of dialogue. Would I say it? And if I heard it, would I believe it? That kind of thing. In truth, you will always find it difficult. The creation of an idea, the following of a story germ, the building up of a plot, the creating of people, of flesh and blood character, these are not easy things. They're extremely difficult, but conversely, don't be put off by the fact that this month you can't do it, and next month is maybe even harder. This is, if not a lifetime process, it's awfully close to it. The writer broadens, becomes deeper, becomes more observant, becomes more tempered, becomes much wiser over a period of time passing. It is not something that is injected into him by a needle. It is not something that comes on a wave of flashing explosive light one night and say, huzzah, eureka, I've got it, and then proceeds to write the great American novel in 11 days. It doesn't work that way. It's a long, tedious, tough, frustrating process. But never, ever be put aside by the fact that it's hard. If it weren't hard, everybody would be a writer, and we'd have nothing but books. Slovenly, grubby, filthy, heavy, gudgy books weighting our world down. The fact that it is a very selective and a very challenging process, unique to a few, is what makes literature so valuable and so wonderful.
Thank you all for watching Rod Serling's Top Rules for Writers. If there was any rule that stuck with you, make sure you drop it in the chat and just leave any general comment that you have about what he had to say. If you'd like to learn more about our classes, please visit communitylit.org, and to learn more about the Sims Library of Poetry, visit simslibraryofpoetry.org. Thank you for watching.